I want to make songs that like a wider, younger audience can get behind, you know? A kid who just, you know, is just now getting over like My Chemical Romance or something. Or like, you know, just now thinking like, kind of, I want to hear more, something a little bit more experimental. Like not in a sellout way, just in a way that it's like, it's more fun that way.
Let's talk about indie music. More specifically, let's talk about Microcastle by Deerhunter. Not only is this one of my most important albums I've ever heard in my whole life, it's definitely one of my favorites. I think it's easily like top of the 2000s maybe. I like to go a little bit just track by track through it, how I got into it, and just little information that I know about the band in this album. As you saw in the beginning clip, they really wanted this album to be more poppier, a little bit more accessible to young kids, and boy did it come at the right time for me, this young kid. This came out in I think '08. When I finally heard it was the next year though, which is right when I began high school. Yes, I did listen to My Chemical Romance, but you know, when I was in middle school, I spent it listening to bands like them, like Bullet for My Valentine. You got classic rock bands, Guns N' Roses, Led Zeppelin. But I actually was already pretty indie. I mean, overall, my favorite artists, even at that age, were already The Strokes. I don't think I'd gotten quite into Interpol yet, but I was into things like Gorillaz. So my taste was a pretty decent variety already. Most of the music that I listened to, though, truthfully, was just because my friends were into it. And I just was like, I really like music. So I didn't really have any sources, like older siblings or anything like that, to kind of show me the ropes. I mean, my parents listened to Los Bukis and like Spanish radio ballads, which were excellent, and I go back to them all the time now. You know, I started poking around in that age, then like, I'm gonna go figure out what I'm into. People would share music on the internet, and all you really had to go by was like the album artwork and just a brief description of what the listener thought about the album. And what a better place to start than with just the album cover. I don't really know who this is, but just looking at it straight off like a record store shelf or something, it's really like captivating. There's something that's like real pretty about it, but also just haunting and almost kind of scary, especially when you zoom into like that little skull right in the center of the face or the eye. This is one of those albums that actually starts off with an intro. So imagine baby Vic, 14-year-old me, put on my headphones there in the dim light on this freaking shared thread with the scary album cover, hit play, and I just go like completely get my mind blown just from the first track. The intro just has this feeling of like it's just screaming at you in pain. There's something that's very weirdly soothing about the chords, but that just the drums and the guitar are super loud. Everyone's playing like real slow, but it just feels like this wall of sound that is just like crashing into your ears. This idea of like conflicting ideas, like it's almost a preview of what ends up happening on the next track, on the first real track, and a lot of what happens on this album really in general, which is the idea of like these conflicting ideas, these really sad sounding chords at a super loud volume, which leads into the first proper track called Agoraphobia, which I don't know if you ever had this feeling where like you just listen to this song where the title of the track completely nails what the music sounds like. This is that track. So again, contrasting ideas, there's this song where everything's being played super soft, the chords are super pretty, everything's very melodic, the drums are just kind of like chilling. But the subject matter of the lyrics dives into this sense of where it's kind of freaky. It's almost like leans into this like isolation idea of just wanting to be like us, enclosed and losing your senses. I read an interview with the singer where he says the lyrics of the song were inspired from this poem that he read about a boy who wished to be buried alive and had found like comfort and was seeking out to be buried. Because you could kind of almost like, you get that vibe right away from just like the main like chant, like just the cover me, comfort me, cover me and comfort me chanting over and over again. Real morbid because it's so catchy, but you find yourself singing along despite the subject matter just being so dark. I'll delve into this a little bit deeper later, but at that age, I feel like I had real struggle with like, I think fitting in. Like when I first moved was at the start of middle school when I started to listen to all these other bands and stuff that I was into. And so the idea of like wanting to be isolated was kind of almost like a very comforting feeling. I don't think I was like scared or just like ungrateful for like where I was, nor did I have that much trouble making friends, but I think I just found comfort in isolation. I liked having friends, I liked talking to people, but there was also just this real pleasure in seeking out, working on things by yourself, making music by yourself. But obviously the song takes it to the extremes, and we're talking about losing your senses and walls and closing. Another thing that sticks out about this track is that the singer doesn't actually sing the song. The guitarist is actually the one that does the vocals here, which like his very just soft groans work really well on this track. Of course, the next song is a jam, and it just gets right to it. This album to me is someone like, it's kind of like if you had smashed together like the Strokes type of songwriting with the production of a shoegaze album. So right away you got these like real banging riffs with the drums just like bump 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 bump, and it just fits super cleanly with the subject matter of the lyrics, which is just like it never stops, it never stops, it never stops, life keep coming. I think the other big thing that I got from this album was the introduction to more like psychedelic ambient textures. The next track after that, Little Kids, actually slows everything down just a little bit. You get a little bit of that flavoring where like the drums are now just slower to try to just make sure it sticks to like these powerful melodies before it kind of like brings it up again at the end. The drums get a little bit more noticeable, a little bit quicker. But especially once you dive into songs like Calvary Scars, that's when this album goes full on psychedelic, where it's just like the drums are basically replaced with just like tambourines and like percussive instruments essentially. You have all these like textures that make the song sound like it's breathing, but in my brain I know that it's just like guitars and effects and things like that doing that. So to me as a young kid, this album is like the first one that stuck out in my brain as just like, I'm really getting what he's trying to say here. These themes of isolation, these themes of like struggling with your own identity. That's a big one that I'll talk about in a bit. It just really like was something that I grasped immediately, which shocked me because I honestly don't think too hard about things like lyrics, or I didn't at least until that point. I will say probably the only mild criticism I have about this album, it has this feeling of like at the first few tracks are really pick up, go, go, go type of energy, but then it just goes full psychedelic and slows down in the center. Maybe some variety or an extra track might have worked a little better there. But regardless, it does give this album like almost like a haunting pause in the center of it. Or I do understand kind of what he's talking about and like, again, the themes and stuff that he's trying to explain, but it's almost like the story that the album is trying to tell. It gets a little bit like lost. It's just hazy textures and just these like very uncertain, almost primal type of lyrics. When it finally does pick up, this is probably one of my favorite moments on the album. It happens on the song called Nothing Ever Happened. It almost gets in your face about it, like, yeah, that's right, we got a little bit ambient, a little bit hazy, but ignore all that. Nothing ever happened. Whatever weirdness you just experienced in the middle of the album, forget it. And the chorus just completely like gets right in your face with the themes of the song, which is just nothing ever happens to me. Life just passed and flashed right through me. It's pretty fitting as the longest song on the album, because in the second half is almost just like this like jam session where you just have like the guitar and stuff like playing back and forth as the drums and everything break everything down. And I think the singer does get a little bit more specific with his own issues on this song right here, where I know he's struggled with something called Marfan syndrome, which, you know, I can't speak too much on like the medical side of that, but I know physically it does give you some type of physical disability. I mentioned that he struggled with divorced parents at a young age. So like, I'm sure between just certain traumas, issues with like body dysmorphia, I'm sure the divorce, that experiencing that all at a young age, it seems almost like the song itself is trying to like avoid thinking about these certain subjects, but it's also kind of like, I think, what's really gluing the themes or whatever of the album together. The divorce specifically seems to be front and center on the next track, Saved by Old Times, where I did read in an interview where the guy, because his parents split when he was so young, he grew up in a really big house, regular house, but not really with any social contact, you know, no friends or like family was rarely there. And so really it was just like old music that like is what gave him comfort, listening to like movie soundtracks, Edward Scissorhands and things like that, or cool bands from the 90s like Stereolab. Hence the name of this track, just Saved by Old Times. He was literally saved by old times, by old memories, by old music. And I do recall lots of moments where I feel like music definitely, if like not saved my life, I don't know, I can't say, but at the very least helped me become who I am and helped me through some really difficult moments. We move now into the second to last track, which is a track called Neither of Us Uncertainly, where it does start to slow down a little bit. It's a great shoegaze song. You know, the guitars are front and center. The drums are just pounding away at the background. And then the lyrics talks a lot about just the idea of time passing, the idea of aging. And so now we move on to the last track, which in my opinion is one of my favorite albums. This album opens in the best way and it also closes in the best way. Twilight at Carbon Lake. In my mind, as soon as I listen to this song, I imagine just like this old dusty prom, kind of like the set from Carrie, that movie Carrie. It also kind of plays around with that idea of like, I guess like prom music is the closest way I could describe it. It has like this oldie like type of chord progression, but it's a little bit twisted. Every now and then you'll get like a chord here and there that's not quite bubblegum, like it doesn't quite fit in. The production itself has like all these like little details and stuff peppering the track that are just very ambient, very psychedelic. They do that cool reverse hi-hat trick on the drums where it sounds like the hi-hat's being like sucked up or something, like by a vacuum. It's very catchy. It sounds very sweet. Again, if you had no context to the lyrics or whatever's going on and everything was produced super cleanly and straightforward, it would be like a freaking, like, I don't know, Richie Valens song almost. Every now and then you hear the lead guitar come in just to kind of copy what the vocalist is singing, which is always a thing that I grew to like use in my own music. Behind all these warbly guitars, these like slow prom drums, you have these lyrics talking about distant memories, lyrics that talk about the self struggling with identity, which again is just something that I struggled with for the longest time, and even struggled with into like my late 20s. I was named after my dad. I'm a junior, and so he was like my hero growing up. When like I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do with my own life, a lot of it was attached to, I think, what he had done, what he had provided, him being just like a first generation, or my first generation, him being an immigrant. I saw him pull just crazy impossible things and always got it done. And so I think I always put this expectation upon myself that I didn't really know who I wanted to be. I just know that I wanted to be just as courageous as my dad was. But I had neither the confidence in my own abilities, nor I think really the maybe guidance to really pursue what I wanted to do. Struggling with your own identity, which is funny because my name literally means winner. And again, I'm a junior, so it's kind of like you were assigned to become a winner in a sense, if that makes sense. But having such a negative image of myself, it just led to just this real dissonance. There's that word again, huh? Contrasting idea where I'm named after a winner despite not feeling like one ever. So this song I really relate to because the idea of struggling with your own identity is something that I would come to use a lot in my own work. And it's something that I just like, really just gets me on an emotional, deeper level. Even though all the lyrics on this album are just very, again, hazy, they're not so straightforward. You almost have to like fish your own interpretation from them. This is, I think, the one that lyrically sticks out the most to me. There's a moment where the song feels like it's about to start building up and like everything's starting to get louder and louder and louder, and then suddenly it slows down and it stops. And like now the singer's just whispering his vocals, and it's back to that same weird prom band energy, like it just completely dropped the building up of the sound. Then they do just another verse when suddenly everything happens again. It starts getting louder and the guitar starts getting thicker, when suddenly everyone at the very end just comes crashing in, and you just get like the guitar riff playing louder and louder and louder. In the background you can tell the drums are just bashing away at cymbals and bashing away at fills. Everything is completely chaotic, where you have the singer just wailing his heart out at the very end. And at this moment it just feels like my heart is not only racing, but I also feel like crying all at once. This feels like a song that I'm going to hear on my deathbed when I'm thinking about my favorite moments, and then the worst moments in my life, and then everything in between, and then suddenly the album just ends. And I'm left there in the dark, just feeling completely speechless, like I'd never listened to anything like this before. Now that I'm talking about it out loud, I'm sure this is what boomers sound like when they're talking about any Pink Floyd album. But hey, I like it. And this album really not only started to just nail the type of taste, the type of music that I was going to get into, but it also just really set me on a path where like I just really like that idea of contrast, you know. And so similarly, like how I'm talking about this album so positively, despite the fact that, you know, the day has ended, everything's winding down, everything's getting darker. This album too has some incredible like production, some very nice, catchy, sweet, soft sounding melodies even at times. But the actual instrumentation will have like loud guitars playing on soft things, or the lyrics themselves will be very like borderline like PTSD, or like talking about these dark subject matters of self-identity struggles. Great riffs, great songwriting. It's a real shame that they never got bigger. I think their whole catalog is worth listening to. This is definitely, I think, like their earlier releases, maybe their third album, I want to say. But to a young kid like me in high school, this was like my first, like, man, I discovered these guys. And so like, this is easily like my first recommendation, not only from this band, but to just anyone wanting to get into indie rock in the 2000s. I think you won't find a better record than this. So I think that'll do it for this video. It's gone dark and hazy outside, so I'll go ahead and just leave you with this, seeing how they've like kind of stayed pretty underground. I always will root for the underdog, and so I think these guys are like kind of like, hey, these are my underdogs that I'll always root for when it comes to their success. But subscribe if you'd like to hear more thoughts about music and stuff that I like. I'm definitely gonna do more talks about that, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Good night.